everyone, and welcome to the first show ever of Interventions of the Third Kind. My name is Lorna Camacho, and I have been a certified medical interpreter for about 5 years. And I decided to create a space where people can communicate and talk about the day-to-day issues that interpreters like us that do it for a living, Monday through Friday, you know, can discuss certain things, share information, maybe do CEUs. I mean, that's in the near future. But when I decided to do this, the person that I decided to do this with came to my mind really quickly. I met him my first year as an interpreter, fresh out of starting my life as an interpreter. And I thought he was the perfect partner to do this great show. And this is Sean Durmansell, ladies and gentlemen.
Hi, everybody. I'm so excited to be here. Everybody that knows me knows how much I like the sound of my own voice. So now I have the opportunity to share that with everybody else. So I'm just absolutely thrilled to be here. Absolutely. I myself am an interpreter. I myself am a certified interpreter. I am also a medical interpreter, and I followed Lorna around in the hospital, and we did a lot of good stuff at that hospital. And we were a testament to how well interpreters can work well together for the betterment of the whole continuum of care, really, even though we had to jam it down some providers' throats. Oh my God. So many times when we would show up and, oh, no, she fine. Her son helped us. No, I was in triage this morning. She not fine. So yeah, I'm so thankful to be here. Lorna.
And, I'm glad you mentioned that. The fact that sometimes interpreters are not needed, and the fact that when we met, things as interpreters were pretty different than they are right now, right? I'm sure, like you were remembering about triage and all those things and all the miles we needed to walk in an entire day just
Oh
in
my
the
God.
alone, right?
Not 9-story hospital. Okay. I tell people this a lot. 9-story hospital with a set of towers next to it that we also went to. Remember the Medical Park Towers? So we
Yeah.
were running up and down 9 stories. NICU was on the 8th floor. 9th floor.
Yeah.
What am I saying? 9th floor. NICU was on 9th floor. Triage was on the 1st floor. And sometimes I would go down those stairs so fast, it was almost like I was falling rather than,
I know.
run. But the elevators, oh my God.
I actually lost weight when I started working.
Yeah. Yeah, the Fitbit, that was the thing, to see how many miles
Remember
you
that?
run. Yeah.
I'm actually glad you mentioned the history, our history when we started barely interpreting. Well, not you, but me, that first year, right? 2015. But what was your first interpretation ever? Because my first interpretation ever was so crazy. I still, when I tell the story about it, I kind of think about it and say, I cannot believe you just went through that, Lorna. But I want to hear yours first. Tell me, what was your first interpretation ever?
My first professional interpretation, we'll call it that, my first professional interpretation actually happened after I went to a meeting of the Medical Interpreting Network in Georgia. So I attended as a freelancer. I had just gotten my business cards from Vistaprint for $5. And they said, Sean, interpreter, and my number, and my Google Voice number, and my Gmail. And I found out about this meeting and just, okay, fine, I might as well go. And when I showed up, I immediately realized, right when I walked, it was at a hospital. When I showed up, I realized I didn't even check to see if I have to pay, if I have to be a member, if this is a private organization. I just showed up. And so when I realized that, I just kind of told them that also. I just realized I'm not a member. I don't know if I have to pay to be here. I don't have any money to pay to be here, but I have business cards. And they're like, come on in, no problem. And I mean, I met all these people. I got business cards. Yeah, thank you. So I gave out tons of cards. And then that next day, I got a call, and it was from a court saying, we received your contact information from such and such, who was recommended that you might be available to cover this court assignment today, sir. I was like already putting my pants on, all ready to go. So I didn't even pay attention to what, this is we have a budget. That's fine, I'll take it. Wait, go now. So when I show up to this court case, oh my God, it's a conspiracy case. So there are 6 accused individuals. Every single one of them is an LEP. Every single one of them has an attorney. And I am given an attorney who is also, I like when I show up and like your attorney's over here and I see him, when I see him, at the moment that I see him, I notice that he's saying, bueno, sí, pero vamos a esperar a ver lo que sucede. And I'm like, why, what's going on here? Why am I here? I have to interpret for a bilingual attorney for the first time ever in court. Ever, you know, and it's like as soon as the door shut behind me, it was really loud and everyone looked up and I guess I should have held the door. I didn't know. So I'm in court and then, you know, the judge was like, you know, you're the interpreter. And I was like, yes, yes, Your Honor. You know, so I'm standing there and at one point he says, please state your full name for the record. And I said, Sean Matthew Durmansell. And he said, Mr. Interpreter, I have your business card. I'm speaking to the defendant. Okay, so I said, favor de declarar su nombre. Then he says, so later on in this case, he says, so ask him if he has any questions. And I said, so ask him if he has any questions to the defendant. And the defendant said, ask who if they have any questions. And I said, ask who if they have any questions. And the judge said, I told you to ask him if he has any questions. So do it. And I said, I told you to ask him if he has any questions. So do it. And the LEP, the accused, said, who am I supposed to say that to? And I said, who am I supposed to say that to? And the judge said, Mr. Interpreter, approach the bench right now. So I walked up to the bench and he said, what the hell are you doing? And really, my voice did crack when I said, you're up. You're up. Your Honor. Your Honor. Your Honor. The interpreter is interpreting in first person. So would the court, and I'm thinking to myself the whole time, like, don't say you. You're not supposed to look, you can't even look at the judge. It's what you don't look at him. You don't say you or sir or your majesty, your highness. It's your honor, or the court. Would the court, your honor, would the court please? So, but wait a minute. So I say the court if I'm talking about the judge, but if I'm talking to the judge, talk about the judge at the same time, do I say, would your honor ask the court? But then if I'm telling the honor to ask the court, he's asking himself, wouldn't I just say the court ask the court? Wait a minute, can the court ask the court something? You know, of course, this is all taking place in a split second, and I'm like, would the court needs to speak directly to the person that they're addressing? And he said, get over there and ask him if he has any questions. And so I walked back over and said, ¿Tiene alguna pregunta? No, hombre, no questions. After the case, you know, I'm required to have him sign my work order that says he did this for this long, from this time to this time, and
Yeah.
pay him. I guess you should pay him, you know. And I'm just kind of like, here's my my work order, sir. You know, like, shit, you know. And he's like, this guy says to me, gives me like a Terminator ocular pat down, you know, these functions. And he goes, you know, I know you're a native speaker, but I cannot tell where you're from. Where are you from? I can't place that accent. And I'm just like, as he's signing the paper, you know, the blah, blah, attorney such and such. And I'm just like, I'm a native Texan. Thank you. Bye. And just, you know, I mean, I just absolutely, you know, the craziest thing is how absolutely just exhilarating the whole experience was. Truly.
Well, at least you laugh. I mean, it was a very funny experience. I mean, yeah, there was a lot of adrenaline, but I mean, compared to mine was all crying, all crying. And then first day interpreting, and they tell me, oh, you know, we have a call in 405, you know, which was the oncology area, but I didn't know it was oncology. So, you know, I'm going there, walking really fast to get there as soon as possible. And it was a new diagnosis, you know, for a small cancer patient of 4-year-old, you know. Parents completely LEP. I mean, it was disastrous. I mean, it was not disastrous in the fact that I didn't interpret. I mean, I was so focused on interpreting because I was feeling that like it was my own child being diagnosed. And then the mom crying, the dad crying as well, you know, just, you know, think about a Mexican tall 6 feet something guy crying like he's 5 years of age, and it was really emotional.
I gotta say one thing. I'm thinking about the fact that that was like your inauguration. That was your ahí se estrenó, right? That was your
Yeah.
first time. And the thing is this is that there's such a difference. The way that court was for me, it became like repetitive or robotic or and some for some it's a good thing. Okay, but my point is that is protective. Okay, you're at a distance,
Mhm.
you come in, you say something, you sit down, you say something. At some point maybe you might be next to lep like this and
Mhm.
simultaneously in their ear. Okay, but for the most part you'll stand when they stand, you go up to this, down there, but it's not the same type of dialogue. I mean, I
Mhm.
understand the difficult cases, etc., but the difference is there's a very clear distance between the interpreter as an officer of the court and
Yeah.
the defendant or the demandado or the solicitante, whatever it might be, whatever the case might be. There's a difference when you are a medical interpreter. I'm just thinking about you walking that hall up on the
Yeah.
fourth floor, okay, 4 North. It's the I want to say something like the big leagues because you were like you say your first encounter and you were in the middle of something that was so charged with such strong emotion that you were just I'm in this shit now. That's it. I'm in it.
Not even, I was not even certified yet.
Yeah, but you
Um,
were you were in it. And then I mean,
and
again,
I
okay, the
was in it.
certification is more of a recognition rather than and in your case especially. I mean, you
I
walked
mean,
in the door with it.
but it's part of it. And when we started doing this, right, we were in a different type of situation. I mean, things were not as lined up as they are right now, and you didn't find that information that you find now out there anywhere. About interpreting and stuff like that. I mean, I didn't know anything about interpreting. I didn't do a search on Google like nowadays, and then said, okay, let me become an interpreter. No, I saw that somebody sent an email to someone and someone forwarded me that email thinking I might be interested to take a class about community interpreting. I saw the email. I said, I don't know. I've been thinking I may need a change of careers, right? And I went to the webinar, to the workshop that we were doing, and it was with Esther Diaz, which is an excellent,
Oh,
excellent teacher.
okay, that lady is a fantastic teacher. She
Yeah,
really
no,
is.
she has been my inspiration since day one for interpreting. Since I said, okay, I took the class with her and I understood what it was about and the way, oh my God, she explained. And it was a class to help refugees more than anything.
Right. Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. Because they're already going to be interpreting. They've
Yeah,
already been interpreting. So it's like, let's
yeah.
get them trained at least so that they can, because that's definitely where they're going to be. Definitely interpreting.
I enjoyed that workshop. It was a 2 or 3 day thing, and then we came back the next weekend, and it was a 2 or 3 day thing, and that was it. But it was great because it opened my eyes to a possibility of doing something that make me feel good at the same time that
Agreed.
I'm working. I'm
Agreed.
working 9 to 5, and it doesn't. It's heavy sometimes because of the type of things we need to talk about, right? But it was not heavy as to the jobs that I was having in communications because they had to do with social media. I mean, that was too stressful.
I was going to
I
say the
mean,
deadlines and the constant,
yeah,
even
I
when you
didn't
finish
want
one
to.
project, you got another one coming your way that's already overdue. You need to catch up
Yeah,
on this. Yeah, yeah. I mean,
and the long hours,
I will echo
long
that with
hours.
you. The work creates. I used to say that myself. It creates joy for me. I
Yeah,
mean, and speaking frankly, entre nos, I'm also a whore for attention. I love it. I love it. The phone that we do now is not like we used to do in the room
yeah.
because when I could walk in the room, hola, ¿qué onda, chamaquillo? Árale pues, ¿qué onda, tigre? ¿Cómo seguimos, pues? Amá, ya sigue bien. I knew everyone.
And that's why, I mean, to me, it was so important to do this show also because I mean, we went through so many things to just find out about interpreting, and nowadays it could be easier. I mean, we can talk about this. We can refer people. We can we can help people get connected to organizations that certify interpreters. And that's why also I decided that that was going to be kind of the main topic of our first show. You know, what to do to become an interpreter. Have you been itching about changing careers? Maybe, to languages. You've been thinking maybe you'll try this, but you're not sure because you don't know anything about, medical. But in reality, things now are easier and you have steps that you can go through if you really know, the both languages. I mean, you are literate in English and the target language. In this case, us, we do Spanish, right? And one of the things you have to do to become an interpreter is that at least you have to be at least 18 years of age and have at least a U.S. high school diploma or GED or equivalent from your country, or depending on the language that you're going to do, right? What else?
Well, training before even getting into the field, you got to have at least completed what they call the minimum 40 hours. Anywhere you look for an interpreting job, and trust me, I used to spend 2 hours a day looking for interpreting contract work, and every single one is going to say something about a training program required. If you don't see a program required, don't apply for that job. First off, okay, you got to sniff out the chaff right away. Minimum 40 hours. Now, I am going to comment that 40-hour minimum was the minimum when I was trained, which was 100 years ago, okay? Point is, that's not going to be the norm very soon. That time frame is going to be expanded. 40 is going to become to 60. 60 is going to come to 80. It's a matter of time before those programs are expanded, okay? Just like we were mentioning before, there's a lot more information out there. There's a lot more programs out there. So you have to be specific. If you're looking to get certified, which should be your ultimate goal if you're choosing this as a profession, whether it's in the legal or the medical fields, there's a certification nationally recognized for either or both fields, should you choose. Whichever venue you're going to follow, you need to make sure that you solicit a training program that is recognized, or for lack of a better term, approved by the certifying body from whom you plan to seek your credential. Both medical national credentials, the NBCMI and the CCHI websites, will guide you to myriad programs that you can select from yourself that are reputable. It's not a cheap item to pay for, but it's an investment in yourself as a business and as a professional. Not to mention, it's also kind of a bar to entry. Okay, if you can't afford it, you can't manage to get this training, then you have no business facilitating communication without the proper knowledge behind it. And that's what this is your knowledge base. Now,
And besides, you get a better rate when it comes to jobs. I mean, you're certified because you took that course, and then after that, you take the test, the written test, and then after that, you take your certification per se, and you're golden. I mean, after that, you just have to keep it with CEUs. Simple.
that's right. You cannot do this work without fluency in both the source and target language that you'll be working with. Okay, and not only do you need that fluency, but you need to be able to demonstrate that fluency. Okay, that's referred to as linguistic proficiency. You need to be able to demonstrate that. Now, depending on your background, that's going to be demonstrated through some credential that you may already have. That might be your high school and college diploma. That might be a test that you have taken when you came to the States. Whatever it is, the bottom line, again, I refer back to the same point I made when talking about selecting your training program. Either certifying body, whether it's through the medical fields or the National Consortium of State Court Registry, all have guides and specific tests from which you can choose as a candidate, or registries of documents that you can produce as a candidate to be approved and to prove that proficiency or that qualifying certificate of completion from one of these programs. So whichever avenue you choose, that is going to be your guide. That is your go-to.
I was going to bring some of my friends, interpreters that do different other modalities of interpreting so they can share their experiences with us. And I introduce you to Jaime Cano and Rosa Ospina. Welcome, guys.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Welcome, welcome.
Well, like I said, we were going to share some experiences. So let's start with the first question. The question that costs $1 million. Why interpreting? Let's start with Rosa first.
Um, so my story with interpreting is not so romantic. I like to call it a marriage for convenience, because I had a former career, which was in hospitality, back where I'm from in the Dominican Republic. So I fell in love with a guy, got married, moved to the States, and I realized that after being married, that career was very demanding and not very compatible with a guy who also traveled a lot for work. So when I was working in hospitality in the States, I had a lot of Hispanic staff for whom I had to interpret, just impromptu there, in meetings and whatnot. So when I decided to quit hospitality, interpreting seemed like a natural, available way to go. Plus, it was portable. My husband's in the military, so I felt I could take my job with me pretty much wherever we went. And that's how it started for me.
I think a lot of us also realized at some point, oh, this, you can get paid to do this as well. Okay, this can be a job too. That's great. So thank you so much for that, Rosa. Jaime, I'm dying to hear your story here. You want to go ahead and share with us?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, all of my education and background is in education, actually, and specifically early childhood education. And so at some point, I was trying to go back to school and finish a degree in education. And those plans, as far as like my financial aid and things like that, fell through. So I was left with a very, very part-time position in the preschool that I had been working at for a long time, and really just needed something, um, especially because at that point I just had kids. And so it was really, or I was a new father. So I really needed something. And a friend of mine said, hey, I think we have some positions opening up for interpreters at the hospital. And I had, very limited interpreting experience. It was mostly, as you were saying, Sean, like something I didn't know you could really get paid for, was that kind of profession. I had mostly done it either out of necessity. I work in a Spanish immersion preschool. So a lot of times I just had to interpret for parents and the teachers who are mostly from Latin America and really sometimes just don't speak very much English at all. So it was just a thing that I did in the past. And so when my friend offered me that opportunity, I jumped on it because I thought, again, yeah, that's great. I didn't know I could get paid to do that.
That's so awesome. And as a interpreter, when you start, you don't know where you're going, you don't know what you're going to do, you don't know what you're even talking until you're out after the adrenaline has come down and the rush and all that. So, when you decided that that was what you were going to do, what was your first interpretation ever? Rosa, let's start with you.
So, my first interpretation ever, I would have to say it was when I was still working as a supervisor in hospitality. I was yanked by one arm, thrown into staff meetings. Some of them were educational, just regular employee training. Others, were a little bit more interesting when there were issues involving sometimes the police, or when employees would get hurt and they needed to go to the emergency room, workers' comp and all that. I didn't know anything about that back then, but I was sort of thrown into the situation. So I think those were my first experiences. And when I started to get hooked into this interpreting world, because not only you're helping people communicate and ensure equal language access, but let's face it. I mean, let's say it. You find out everything that's happening. You learn about so many things. You're there in situations that are very tense and where people are very vulnerable. So I think those were the moments when I started to sort of fall in love with this.
And you know what? I'm glad you say that you're the only person in the room that actually knows both languages and you know what's going on anyway. Everybody else knows half of the story, right? What about you, Jaime? What was your first ever interpretation?
Well, I've, you know, I guess officially my, or professionally, I should say, my interpretation experience, you know, started right when I got hired as a medical interpreter at the hospital that I still currently am an interpreter for. I can't, you know, honestly, I can't remember my very first encounter. I remember the first encounter that I had once I had stopped training, and once I no longer was able to hold Sean's hand that I held very tightly at first, and then Lorna's hand at the, you know, children's hospital. I remember there was an occasion when Lorna, when I was still training, and Lorna had to just very politely step in and say, "I got this. Shh, I got you. I'll do this," because she could tell I was struggling. So, you know, after that, once the training wheels were off and I didn't have, you know, somebody there, I actually had probably one of the saddest encounters I've had, you know, since I've been doing this job for the last 5 years. It's probably to this day one of the saddest encounters I've had. So it was a pediatric oncology encounter. So I could just leave it at that. But you know, I will say I will never forget that because it was my first on my own. And I just got thrown in it, and you really realize in those moments. It was a lot of things that I realized about interpreting that I had no idea how many or how skillful you have to be to do that job well. I had no idea how much more I have to learn about being able to really, you know, do a good quality job of transmitting messaging. And that's not something I really gave much thought to. And it just really gave me such a deep respect for the profession and realizing that, you know, wow, I'm actually doing this as a part of this encounter and this exchange and these emotions and this technical language and doubts and fears and unknowns, and you're in it. So yeah, it was a huge learning experience.
To say honestly, my preference, I still feel that I make my strongest connection in the room with the patient. Personal opinion. Being in that room, I have an energy that when I turn it all the way up, it's very, very useful to me, especially in this field. It has worked for me in other employ as well. But this, while working this work, it actually brings me joy on a personal level. I think that the video right now makes the most sense, but I still feel the strongest connection to that magic of healing when I'm in the room, even if I'm over standing in the room, not saying anything until somebody says one little, there's going to be this little stick right now. You know, even that, just to be there is to me the real privilege. You know, so I'm curious, Rosa. I'd love to hear you weigh in on this if you don't mind. Go ahead.
It's funny how we all feel differently about all these things because I have mostly interpreted remotely over the phone. But over the last few years, I started doing gradually more and more on site, in court, not only in hospitals, in community settings. And as of last year, VRI. Now, I thought phone was my favorite because I'm a stickler for role boundaries, and I feel the phone gives me a shield where I can stay within those boundaries and not step out. However, I realized after starting VRI that that's now at this moment, it might change next month, but right now it's my favorite because I can do this if I'm muted. I can mute my camera if the provider walks out because I cannot wheel my own cart outside of the room in VRI, like, whoa. But I can mute the camera, I can mute the mic, I can sort of distance myself from the patient if the provider walks out to look for some chaperone or for some tools. But I get visuals that have turned out to be really helpful for me to enhance my accuracy. And not only that, but to learn with these visuals about how certain procedures, we're not in a legal setting, procedures in medical settings take place, how many people are present, the gender, because sometimes you're thrown into a call if you're not there and then you don't know who you're talking to or how many people are there. So I feel those things in VRI are helpful. And that's why right now, today, it's my favorite modality. Plus, I don't get coronavirus. Sorry.
No. And you know what? I actually started as a staff interpreter. That was my first ever experience interpreting. And I love being there. I love the fact that I was able to be part of a C-section and see life being born every single day of my life. I mean, that was an incredible experience for me. But then once that was taken away, I started meeting a little bit of the phone. And at the beginning, I can tell you, Sean can tell you, at the beginning, I was like, what is this? No, I couldn't take it. And now I actually prefer phone. Anything like phone, because like Rosa, I am like that. I want to stick to my protocol, because my protocol is what's gonna make me not be liable. It's what's gonna make me stick outside the conversation, not having to make any decisions, which I love deeply, you know? So to me, phone gives me that flexibility of having that, you know, I can stick to this and not me, you know, I'm just here to communicate. So to facilitate communication. And yeah, sometimes we get outside our roles and we are advocates. We try to clarify, we try to do certain things, but still I have the third person intervention, you know, to save me from anything that can or might happen, right? What about you, Jaime? What's your, you know, favorite modality?
I think probably at this point in person is my favorite. I think I'm just always going to have a special place in my heart for that particular modality, just because I think as interpreters, and you know, I can only speak for myself, but I feel like for myself as an interpreter, sometimes you want to feel so much a part of that team, and so much a part of the thing that's going to really help both, you know, the providers and the patients, that being there physically really helps you feel that way, especially in like a care conference setting. You almost control the flow of that conversation, and you make sure that all parties really get to do what they're there to do. So I really love a lot of things about in-person interpreting, but I have to say I'm really, really enjoying VRI. Just recently, the network that I work for went VRI for my particular location. And so we're exclusively interpreting in that way. And just, you know, the other day, I actually had a care conference. What's funny about VRI, though, I will say, is that you never know what you're going to get. It's that box of chocolates kind of situation. And I just happened to open up and get the chocolate that said care conference with like 10 people. And so it was in one hand familiar territory. So I'm glad I had those in-person experiences to better guide this virtual thing that I was now doing. But it also felt like I could almost feel myself as this floating head that was almost like, okay, these are the parameters of this interpretation. So that was interesting, you know, but I'm really enjoying it. Like Rosa was saying, you know, it's almost a shield that you have. If you need to take a drink of water, you can mute yourself visually. If you need to cough, you can mute yourself audio. So yeah, I'm really liking the VRI.
You know, I'm glad we keep going back and forth to certain, I guess, experiences or time frames in our lives, right? When it comes to that. But what would be something that you did before when you started that you won't do now? And I'm going to tell you, I used to say the word I'm a Spanish interpreter, right? Like you all know, but I mean, I used to say the word instead of for poop, we would say caca in Puerto Rico, right? Caca, right? So in my first interpretation ever, I am with a mom that it's a Mexican mom. I said caca. I mean, I almost was thrown out of the room with a chancla. And that is a true story, okay? I learned that day that you don't say caca because you were raised with that wording and you have always heard the same thing. No, you have to prepare yourself, grow, learn different things every day. So that's why I learned the word popo. That saved my life as an interpreter. What about you, Jaime? I'm going to go straight to you.
We could have a whole conversation about interpreting the word poop. That's all I'm saying. We can. That's a whole field of interpretation right there.
I will agree with that. I agree with that. Yeah.
I mean, yeah. I feel like maybe the next podcast. Something I would never do again. There's a lot of things, I guess. I will never go into a situation that's going to be complex or that is going to require, a skillful interpretation, unprepared. I learned that so many times. I mean, an embarrassing amount of times the hard way. And most of those, I have to say, I got the job done. But what was required was just so much more than what I gave. So yeah, I'll never do that again.
Since the time when you were this tall as an interpreter up until today, as you've grown so tall, look at you. I'm curious, I mean, really the magic of this work, it's not like any other trade, from my personal experience, where you learn to do it and that's it. No, this is something we're always trying to change and learning from, in some cases, our mistakes. I'm curious, Rosa, what would be, what did you used to do that you would not do now? What did you do when you started interpreting that you cannot believe that you used to do?
Well, now that I've grown all 4 feet, this is going to sound weird, like many things I say, but after I talk more, then it makes sense. I don't try to help anymore. And this is going to sound weird because we all feel like we do this to help, and we do help in many ways, but bear with me. So before, I used to step out of my roles, like I was jumping left and right, everywhere, all over the place, because I wasn't clear what my role was. And I was on the phone, so, I didn't have a lot of room to go, but still, I went ways. If, for instance, somebody asked for a date of birth, and the other person replied with what happened during their whole day, I would, instead of interpret that, try to control them and make them answer specifically what was being asked, because I thought I was being helpful by making sure they give the answers that are expected. Yes, I did that a lot until I was caught by quality, and then I learned that I wasn't supposed to. But, I realized now looking back, a lot of times I stepped out because I wanted to help. But also, I must confess, it's also because, and I don't know if other colleagues will identify with this, but I sometimes felt I did it because I was afraid to be put on the spot. If there was a misunderstanding that I was picking up, which happens between people who speak the same language, between people who live in the same household, let alone, between two people that maybe don't even know each other, they're just talking on the phone in different languages through an interpreter. I mean, it's bound to happen. But I was afraid that I was going to be picked on because it was my fault. I was just insecure that way. Now I won't do that anymore. I interpret, and I realize the best way I can help is focusing on conveying those messages as best as I can. Let me give you an example, very short one. I was in court not too long ago, and the judge was asking something to the witness. This was immigration court, so she was a respondent and witness because she was giving testimony for herself. So she was talking about how far away her school was from her house and all the dangers that she encountered along the way. So it was like an extremely long commute. So she said something like an hour and 45 minutes. So the judge wanted to make sure whether those 1 hour 45 minutes were each way or round trip, basically. So the judge asked the question, each way, and I conveyed the question in Spanish. Then the respondent answered, except on Saturdays and Sundays. So I was like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. She misunderstood. She misunderstood. What do I do? What do I do? How do I fix this? So I just answered like that. And then I realized in English, the correction sounded the same. So the judge said, I didn't ask each day, I asked each way. So magically in Spanish, because of the word choices I made, so I'm like, okay, the judge knows, just like I know, she misunderstood. She's not gonna think automatically I misinterpreted the question. And misunderstandings can clear up on their own sometimes in between them without us as interpreters interfering, just conveying the hesitations, just conveying the the what do you mean, or the nonsensical answers, if that's a word in English. Is it? Yes. Yeah, I should broaden my vocabulary. But anyway, I think you get my point, right? I don't do that anymore. And I used to all the time. And now I stay away.
I'd like to point out that if you use a word as an example, that word is in your vocabulary. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
And actually, that brings us to the kind of final discussion of our session. I mean, what would be something that you would advise other interpreters? And this is something that is very dear to me, particularly because there's many interpreters out there that just start, you know, they just get with this. They didn't know they could get paid for this. Like we've been, you know, talking about it, because we didn't have all the information to find it at that time. Now it's easier to find it because everybody is making an effort, like in the interpreting environment, to try to get, you know, make that information accessible, right? And I would say, as Lorna, I would say, what would I advise other interpreters? I would say, if you are really, really interested in doing something like this, prepare yourself for what is coming. It's not that it's difficult, but it means that you need to look for information, prepare yourself for what you need to do, follow those steps, so you don't have to go back and forth in this situation, because that can take you up to 1 or 2 years of time that you don't have. I mean, and you could be making that money if you are really good in both languages. You could be making a life of this, you know, making it your business. So what would be something that you would advise other interpreters, Rosa?
Well, I have a long list based on personal experience. um, but I think that I would go with the main things that we've mentioned here. I would say know your depth, know your level of skills, so that you can know which type of assignments or on which settings you can start interpreting if you're starting out, and then branch out as you go, like many of us have done. And what I hold very dear to my heart is know your role boundaries. Sometimes doing like this, stepping away and sticking to your role, is the best thing you can do to help an encounter, to help two parties. I mean, like we've said before, yes, we do know both languages, and many times we know linguistically more than any other person present what is going on, but that doesn't mean we're the smartest person there. So be humble, be able to make mistakes and acknowledge them and learn from them and move on.
I agree with the move on. I think that it's interesting because I had a similar thought run through my head that was more Sean-like, which was know your role and shut your mouth. You know, I remember about a year ago, I presented an idea for a webinar that was quickly edited. And the webinar was shut up and interpret. Okay. Because I really feel like a lot of us a lot of us get into this work because we can do it. And excuse me, this check is for interpreting. I'll be here tomorrow. You know, that kind of thing. But we stay in it because of a calling. We stay in it because we care, right? And I was thinking like the timeline, like little Sean wanted to be the best interpreter in the world. I was gonna, you know, get the gold microphone at the Interpret Olympics. I was gonna be so awesome, you know. And years pass, and I realized that the true Jedi level of this work is a thorough understanding of why it's so important to follow these canons, just like Rosa was saying, to stay within that role, and why it's so important when you think you're helping, but actually you're not. Anytime you get involved as a person, you've left that conduit role. You know, I think all the, I mean, not, I wouldn't say every encounter, but I would say the majority of my encounters, the concept of a level fair concept, I'm making this fair, fair, fair. Equal access means fair. Just like Rosa said, people are going to be, I don't understand what you mean. Could you explain that again? So English speakers get confused. Spanish speakers speaking together get confused. It's not my fault, you know, and a lot of us have that tendency. So I think that, you know, if every interpreter were confident in the fact that I didn't add anything to this message, I'm a conduit here. So, you know, you got a problem, you need to look over here. You know, we lack that confidence. A lot of us have what you call the charlatan syndrome, you know, imposter syndrome, right? I'm not good enough to be here, and somebody's going to realize that very soon. I've been worrying about that since I started this work in '06. Somebody's going to realize, what? Aren't you the landscaper? What the, you know, like a, but yeah, I think that the critical thinking in the moment based on a thorough understanding of your code of ethics is what the high level professional interpreter needs to go for. Because that way, I mean, we've all said things that are similar to this, but every encounter is going to be different. Every adventure, you know, you have no idea. Even when they would say, like when they would call us and they go, we need you up in 2:45, you'd be like, okay, that's mother baby. So at least we know that's a certain gamut of encounters, right? But then you get there and it's like, oh, it's just recognition of paternity. Oh, okay, you know, or whatever, some boring thing. But yeah, I think that the main point would be the role. Everything else kind of falls secondarily behind that. If you stay in that conduit role, most of these other things that, you know, we are all, all have tendencies to do from time and again, they kind of go by the wayside. So I think that would be the main message in whichever language, you know. Shut up, interpret, know your role, shut your mouth, remain in the conduit role, please. Jaime, I'm interested in hearing your thoughts on this.
Well, the advice I always give to you know, people that I meet that are interested in interpreting, because you know, much like myself, you know, it's like, oh, you're an interpreter. Could I do that? I mean, are you hiring? I mean, is that a thing that I can do? The advice that I always give to those folks, I think a lot of it just overlaps in general with, you know, any field, any professional field. One, get your credentials together. I think for interpreting right now, that just means take a 40-hour class. If you take that 40-hour class and can maybe find a place to volunteer to build up your skills and add that to your resume, that's really going to have a lot of sway, I think, or at least give you a competitive, you know, piece to your resume. Beyond that, and that's also just going to prepare you in general for the field, exactly, you know, to mirror what Rosa and Sean were saying. It's absolutely going to tell you what those code of ethics are. You're not going to go into your first interpretation, you know, blind. You're going to go in understanding a little bit more, and you won't know until you've seen it. You don't know until you know. But I think until then, it just gives you at least an idea of what you should be doing, where to position yourself, kind of the role that you can play, what your boundaries are. And so I would say, yeah, just give yourself that advantage. The other thing too, I would add to that is, you know, study. I think going into interpreting as a new interpreter, especially, I think this is true no matter how long you've been in the field, but especially as a new interpreter, think of it as you're going to school. You know, you're not going to medical school, you're going to medical interpreter school, or you're going to, you know, court interpreter school, or because so much of what you learn is on the job, and so much of what you encounter can be similar from one case to the next, but maybe in you know, one situation there's a difference, you know, that you have never seen or you've never heard of that terminology. So just, you know, treat it like you're going to medical interpreter school and you're taking notes for the terms that you've never seen and you're never going to forget again. The terms that give you difficulty, which are the terms I always forget, that kind of thing. You know, and your acronyms are huge. And I think in any language, you know, it's hard to, you know, interpret an acronym for what it is. So you end up having to say the whole thing. At least initially, you got to set it up. So this is what it means. And from now on, I will be calling it this acronym. But, you know, until then, so, and I just feel like that's part of, you know, they can't, you know, the professionals that you're working with, they can't see your resume. They don't know how intelligent you might be or how experienced you might be or how capable you are. But what they do know is how well you're handling that terminology that they're throwing at you, and the way that you handle yourself in those situations. And that just sort of raises the level of respect that we get as in this profession. And so, you know, I would just say, give yourself a leg up on your resume and just come in competitive. Study and use this as an opportunity to grow your vocabulary and your knowledge base for whatever interpreting field you're in. And then beyond that, I would say exactly what was mentioned earlier, you know, just really get to know your code of ethics and have that confidence to be able to not only, you know, manage an interpretation and an encounter that may be easy or difficult, but you really are an asset by following that code of ethics. By doing that, you really become, you know, what that conversation needs, which is getting the patient and the doctor or the whomever to get them to communicate and understand each other. That's why you're there. So that code of ethics is going to keep you true to that.
Don't ever assume this is an easy job, baby. Don't ever do, because you are messing with the life of a human being if you are a medical interpreter, like we all are. We are all certified for that. Thank you so much, guys, for being part of this first ever episode of Interventions of the Third Kind. You don't know how proud I am to be your colleague, to have been your friend or being your friend. I mean, I have learned so much from all of you, and I think all your stories are so interesting. Everybody have a different thing, even though you got in it because of a coincidence, because you were bored, because of anything. Interpreting is the best ever. I feel like I'm helping being Wonder Woman every day without, you know, and I'm getting paid for it. Well, thank you so much to everyone for having part of our first ever episode of Interventions of the Third Kind. I had a great fun. I don't know what about you, Sean, but I had
it was
enormous fun tonight.
It was, you know, honestly, I love to talk. I love to listen to myself talk, but I love to talk with other people that are on the same level as me. So this right here has been just a thrill. I'm so happy to get the opportunity to share our opinions with the world, and, you know, certainly interested in some feedback. Looking forward to the next adventure for sure.
And we commit to great content. We commit to do this at least every time we have a chance. So be in the lookout for the very next episode of Interventions of the Third Kind. Thank you so much for your attention, guys. Sean and I say goodbye. Bye.
Hi, this is the interpreter speaking. Dear LEP that doesn't think that you're LEP, or not so L with your EP. You are. When you interrupt me before the question even finishes coming out of my mouth, you're wrong. Okay? When you think you understand something and you jump in but you don't have all of the question, you're wrong. So, with all due respect, shut up and let me do my job. Things would go so much more quickly if I didn't have to worry about you interrupting me every time it's my turn to speak. Just a little public service announcement from your friendly neighborhood interpreter. Thanks so much.